We're back, and Roxy and I are recording during the daytime. Believe it or not, we're both at our clinics midday on a Monday. Watch
How
out,
mature? How mature are we?
Roxy, baby Bram is at his first day of daycare.
Mm-hmm. He's meeting some new friends.
He's meeting friends. She's 6 weeks postpartum. So we are proud of baby Bram and proud of Roxy. Well, we're going to dive in today. We are going to discuss this episode about urgency and urge urinary incontinence and kind of what that is, what we see, how we see it present in our clinic, kind of the things that we look at, some things that you might not think about that can influence when we have urgency or that feeling where it just hits us out of the blue. So hopefully you will understand this a little bit better by the end of this episode. And if you're like, hey, that's me, obviously find yourself a pelvic floor therapist. So Roxy, why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about what urgency is and then urge urinary incontinence?
Yeah. So the proper definition here of urgency is the sudden, compelling desire to void that is difficult to postpone. And so I think we all can relate with this of just like, oh gosh, I got to go now, right? Usually that's us just waiting too long and then all of a sudden being like, yikes, hurry, right? And that is urgency. So like that's the urge or urgency. If we wait too long or if we're really relating urge to the incontinence piece, that's like the leakage, involuntary leakage of urine accompanied by or immediately preceded by urgency. And so that's when it's not quote unquote normal, I would say. And I think we're going to dive into this more, but I think appreciating that we want urge. We want our body to give us the message of urge. This is either too soon or too sudden. Or it's just not an accurate. It's not actually what's happening. So in a real person or in healthy, we want our body to give us that warning. That's actually a really functional, healthy thing. So we don't want to eliminate urge.
Right.
We just want to make it very correct and accurate.
So, and I think with that, I always tell people, we get a signal that we need to pee and we are like, oh, I could pee. And we kind of push it off and we are able to go back about our business. We actually kind of forget. And then we get a second signal. And that second signal is like, oh, hey, yeah, remember, like we had to pee and now it's planning time. So you need to be looking for a bathroom and making the plan to go to the bathroom. But we still have that window of time where we can kind of push it off just a bit, but we're in the planning phase. And then we get that signal of, okay, it's time now. And so then we go to the bathroom and we choose when we let the urine out. It doesn't come out it doesn't just trickle out on the way to the bathroom, as can happen with urge urinary incontinence. Man, I'm struggling with that one today. And so I like to tell people how we get those little signals. And when it starts to become dysfunctional or we get like a mixed signal is when we don't have the urge to pee and all of a sudden it hits us like out of the blue and feels like we are running to the bathroom. That's one thing that can happen. To Roxy's point, to where sometimes it just doesn't line up. Like maybe we went and we barely, which then we start falling into kind of urinary frequency, if you will. But maybe we don't really have to pee, but we get the strong urgency that we need to. That can happen. And so it really is, it's kind of multiple reasons why this can happen, but you just kind of get a mixed signal or a misfire. And we do see this often happening. We get a higher report of this as you get older. And so a lot of times that's what that is associated with is like older individuals. But I mean, I don't know, Roxy and I both would probably agree with me. In the clinic, we see this happening at any age.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes this isn't the driver of what brings people in the clinic, but as we're going through symptoms and we're asking more questions, this ends up, in my opinion, being one of the biggest bothers when it comes down to it of like someone saying, well, I always feel that, or like that's what keeps people from maybe going out and doing as much social things as they want to, because then there's this fear of like, when's it going to hit? Will there be a bathroom? Will I make it? Like it's this big fear factor then that comes into it. So a lot of times people are going to say, oh, I'm leaking or I have this or this. It's like these other symptoms that actually get them in the door. But this ends up just being such a big piece of the overall dysfunction that affects the person. And it's what drives the fear.
Yeah. And a lot of times we hear that this is like a normal part of aging. And though this can be common, again, this is treatable and worth raising awareness about because it is something that we find can sometimes be a pretty easy fix for people once they have some education and they aren't feeling like every time they go somewhere, the first thing they have to do when they go into a store is identify where the bathroom is. If that's you and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I do that," then that's not necessarily a good thing if everywhere you go, your nervous system has already laid down a pattern, a repeated behavior of, "We have to know where the bathroom is, otherwise this isn't good." So basically, we kind of just talked about this, but a normal bladder is the bladder fills, it sends a signal to the brain. The brain assesses whether it's time to void or not. And so if it is time to void and go to the bathroom, then the detrusor, which is the bladder, contracts and the sphincters relax. And, if the sphincters don't relax, obviously the pee's not going to come out. And that's how you void. The bladder contracts, sphincters relax, and we're able to urinate. And then if not, the sphincters stay closed and the bladder accommodates. Okay, so we do have the components of, and let me just also preface this by saying, when you have things like MS or different neurological sort of diagnoses, this can be different. So we're talking about just kind of like the quote unquote just person that comes in that doesn't have any of those diagnoses going on. So you could come in and we could be having a misfiring of the muscles going on. And also too, we do see where we might find that there's some pelvic floor overactivity happening. That can definitely be a thing. And so we're going to be assessing and seeing, okay, what are those muscles doing? When I go to assess, particularly the first layer of the pelvic floor and second layer of the pelvic floor, am I causing any sort of urinary urgency feeling? That can happen. We're going to assess all of that, and that can be a big player in this. But I will say, and this is what Roxy's going to talk about next, normally when we have somebody that has this urgency, they have overrode their signaling so many times that, and then they leak, that then the nervous system gets this upregulation happening. And then we start to get this like, oh my gosh, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go to the bathroom. And so now we're rushing to the bathroom and we leak, and that this cycle keeps starting over and over again. So that's what leads us to the next part, which is the nervous system piece of it.
Sure. So with the nervous system piece, like Megan had indicated earlier, there's, with normal, there should be like the bladder fills and that triggers a signal up to the brain. And then the brain assesses that and says, okay, is it time to go to the bathroom now or is it time to go later? There can be a lot of reasons why that message gets skewed. But well, what we know is then that message it's incorrect. And so if we think about it, if you're just sitting there and all of a sudden you have this strong urge, like you're going to pee your pants, we know factually that the bladder didn't just automatically within 2 seconds fill completely and it's going to overflow if you don't get to the bathroom now. Yet that's the message that's being sent. And so just from an objective standpoint, we can stand back and say, oh, I just went to the bathroom 20 minutes ago. Or, like I haven't drank that much water. I have had no warning sign. And so objectively, we know better, but the physical feeling is that we're going to pee our pants right now if we don't get to the bathroom. And so then we see that turn into a cycle. So the mechanical side or the physical side can start that. So there might be an instance where there were the warnings, you waited too long, you leaked, and then that planted a seed of fear. Mm-hmm. So then the next time the urge came, the body said, go now, 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 there was a panic behind it. So that's kind of one way we can hypothesize that this vicious cycle starts. Another example then would be a mechanical change. So if you had a baby or if, you have these, something mechanically that happens or an injury of some sort where the muscles aren't working correctly, then the pelvic floor is giving signals up to the brain that something's wrong, but that gets translated then when an urge hits. There's so many signals happening and the body gets really confused and whatnot. And that's just an example. That's not everybody. But then that message down says, go now. You need to go now or you're going to leak. Well, then we get, like Megan said, the nervous system gets upregulated because there's so much fear.
Mhm.
Because there's that little whisper in the back of your mind that says, you're going to pee your pants. How embarrassing would that be? Your friends would judge you and people would think you're awful and crazy and like, how embarrassing. And it just is this big like spiral of events. Well, then that happens every time we have that urge.
Yeah.
There's that fear. And that gets us into this rut or this hamster wheel of tension and fear. And then, if the muscles didn't start that party, then they wrap it up. They're keeping it going because then the brain is saying, go now, no, 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 now. And the muscles are squeezing down to try to not
Yes.
let you pee your pants. And so then it's like both and. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the chicken or the egg, but we see that with urgency.
Well, and let me apply this in real life by yours truly, who it's happened to. I have not leaked, so that's good. Okay, a couple of things. So I used to go bike riding with my neighbor, and I loved it. Well, when you're riding and you're going far, there's nowhere to stop and go pee. And somewhere along the lines, I think I needed to pee, and I didn't have anywhere to stop. And so I held it, of course, and I made it. Well, then the next time that I went riding, I was like, there's not going to be anywhere to stop. And I started to feel like I had to pee. And I was like, I got to pee. I knew I didn't have to pee. I hadn't drank enough water and I had already gone before I left. And it was a definite, I was just like, okay, Megan, you know exactly what's going on here. Like, you just need to breathe. And then in that situation, too, you got like the bike seat, like right there, the
Giving you
urethra, the
constant
vulva,
tactile
everything.
reminders.
And, but it was fascinating because if I could get my mind off of it and I was taking, I took some breaths and I just kind of was like, I know what's happening, it goes away. And so I had to kind of just like, it's very easy to train yourself that you think you need to go pee. I wouldn't say it's very easy. It is difficult to untrain that, but you can. Same thing is every time I get ready to get on a flight to go flying, I do not like flying. It charges my nervous system. And every time before I get ready to get on the plane, I'm like, do I need to pee? And I will say there have been times where I have given in and I go pee. And I guess what? I go in there and I go pee and it like trickles out. And that is where that signal doesn't line up. And it was like an urgency feeling, like I better go now or I'm gonna have a problem. And again, so I think the point of telling you all of this is just being able to like stop and think like, huh, okay, if this is you, we can fix this easily, honestly. This is something we can fix. And two, challenge yourself now of like, huh, okay, do I really need to go? The thing is like we know and teach strategies. And if you don't know those strategies, that's hard. But one thing is to slow down, take a deep breath, be like, okay, I don't really need to go, and then move about your business. And I will say, I have one other story. I went to get a mammogram and I had to get a pelvic ultrasound and I had to wait quite a while. And I knew that, and that's okay. But yeah, I had to have an ultrasound with my bladder full. And so I did the mammogram first, and they were like, we just want to make sure you'll have your bladder full. And I was like, yeah. So I was like drinking a lot of water. Well, I didn't realize how long it was going to take to do the mammogram and talk to the doctor and everything. So do my mammogram, sit there, wait for the radiologist to come in. I'm like, okay. Then I go back to the little waiting room area. I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have got to pee. And I really did need to pee. But then it escalated because I didn't know when they were going to come get me. And I was waiting forever. And I was just like, if I go pee and I ruin this, they're going to have to wait and I can't do it. It was this whole stressful thing. Plus, I was stressed about why I was there to get the ultrasound, all this stuff. And you guys, I thought I was going to pee my pants. And I stopped. I used my strategies. I did quick flicks my pelvic floor. I took some deep breaths. I did some heel raises. I quieted the signal down a little bit. I was just getting up to say to somebody, could you please get me started? And Luckily, I didn't have to because she girl came around the corner and she's like, "Are you Megan?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes. Can we get started? Because I have to pee so bad." And she was like, "Oh, of course." So we got it done. So those are my personal stories. We will keep moving. I digress. But just so we know, it happens to the best of us. So if that sounds familiar, there you
And
go.
you survived to tell the tale.
And I
It's
survived.
like I think that's the big thing of there's so much hope in this because yeah, there's a lot that we can do about it and it can be pretty simple. So,
Yeah. So, yeah, we would just have, you come in and we do a pelvic floor assessment. We ask you all sorts of questions so we can figure out patterns and making sure that do you have any other health things that could be playing into this or any other medications? Because sometimes that's a point of it too. But often, us just getting that good assessment, we can get a good idea of what could be driving this issue. And your urge urinary incontinence is really highly prevalent in teachers because teachers and also nurses, y'all have to override your bladder so frequently because you're teaching and you don't feel like you can leave to go pee. And then also when you go, you power pee and you pee as fast as you can. So that's a whole thing. But I mean, yes, we get teachers in here all the time. We fix it. We fix it right away. There's just a few behavioral things that we need to change. Okay, so we are going to give you 2 tips of what not to do if you are having urgency or urge urinary incontinence. Roxy, what is your tip?
my tip number 1 is don't withhold fluids. A lot of times we have people who are not drinking anything or minimal fluids because they don't want to have the urge or they don't want to leak. And this is detrimental because we need the body to be hydrated. And we actually need the bladder to fill well and then empty well too. That's really important. To just not drink water doesn't allow that contrast to happen, and it doesn't help the body be optimal and hydrated day to day. I will say kind of another thing about that. I think it's okay to like front load or be strategic when that fluid is like when you're taking that fluid, don't chug right before you go to bed, or if you know you're going to be somewhere where you can't get to the bathroom right when you need it. Like definitely you can be strategic, but as a whole within the day, we want there to be adequate fluid intake.
That's correct. I will just piggyback that with saying if your urine is really concentrated, it can be irritating to the bladder. And so, therefore, it wants to get it out. So, if you're experiencing urgency, it's not good to also then have concentrated urine. So,
Dilute that
yep.
pee.
And then my tip would be stop like rushing or running to the bathroom when this hits you. I would suggest actually trying to move slowly, which falls into our tips category, but slow down and don't rush. Those are tips that we would not, those are
Are
things on
not
what not to
recommendation.
do.
Yep.
Okay. And then on our what would we do, I will give you one thing that you can do if you're listening to this and you're like, yes, this is happening, specifically for those people who notice this when they pull into their driveway after work or they put their hand like on the door, like it's called key in the door. They go put their hand on the door handle to go in and all of a sudden it hits them. So one tip I have for you is when you pull into your driveway or whatever and you turn off your car, I would actually have you leisurely move slow, walk to the end of your driveway and then walk back up instead of just going right up to the door in a rush and try that. And I will say these tips might not work without having more context behind it, but these are some easy things that like we are like, well, let's give it a shot
Just
and see
try
that.
it. Yeah.
So, and then Roxy, what is your tip?
My tip is to take some deep breaths, and that kind of follows some of the things we've been saying is just to like calm your body down. A lot of times when that urge hits, if you're afraid of leaking or you've historically had a instance of leakage, then your body's gonna be nervous about that. So that deep breath, it comes against that emergency signal, and it tells your body, nope, I'm in control and I don't need to panic. We just don't want to fuel that and affirm that it is an emergency when it in fact is not. We don't want to boost that message and prove it right. We want to actually do the opposite of that. And so, like Megan said, walking nice and slow, taking that deep breath, being confident, and even maybe telling yourself like I can hold it or whatever with that deep breath. so that we try to turn off those emergency signals. And we have one more low-hanging fruit advice, as always. Megan, what's our other thing?
Back to me. Yes. The other thing, as always, don't get constipated. Constipation never helps anything when it comes to our bladder health. So take that and run with it. Keep your bowels moving. We hope that's helpful. So we know this episode is kind of short, a little nugget, definitely for people who are listening that are more on the patient side. But hopefully, this gets your mind thinking a little bit of either yourself or your loved ones on, oh, if I'm living with this, I don't have to. And this is something that is fairly easy for us pelvic floor therapists to be able to identify and address. And obviously, if not, then we're digging in even more and looking and seeing what other contributing factors could be going on. But we hope it was helpful. And as always, we will keep the conversation going.